Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Our guest today has been a CEO for over 25 years, has served as a coach to more than 1,000 business people across Australia, and chairs 6 boards, including Neighbourlytics, which is a fast-growing technology company in Australia. Today, he is going to show us how good questions differentiate technicians and leaders. Please put your hands together and help me welcome to the Win Sales Now podcast, our good friend, Ray Brown. Woo. Ray, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
It's an honour to have you here with us. I've got to ask, you've been a business coach for more than 15 years. You've served as a CEO for more than 25 years. You've led a team of more than 150 men and women. What's been the happiest day in your career?
It's a really interesting question. Happiest days, I was thinking through what that might be, and I think you might be surprised by the answer. I worked I was CEO of a carrot processing company, and we were effectively put out of business by the UK supermarkets. It's a common story in farming. And that happened around Christmas time, and we had, I think it was 25,000 tons of carrots in the ground, and we had to sell those between Christmas and May. And everyone said, people won't stay once they know the business is closing down. The business is going into receivership. And that really tested my leadership. And I think the happiest day was the final day of that business, because everybody stayed. Everybody got the last lorry on the road off to Tesco and Sainsbury in the UK. And we actually played five-a-side football at the end of the working session. And I felt if we can get that engagement in those circumstances, I must be doing something right. So it was an unhappy day that actually turned into a really happy day in my career.
So out of all the things you could have done, carrots is an interesting thing to sell.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Business. Well, the road into carrots was, I was CEO of a sandwich business. We made 25,000 sandwiches a day. And when we sold that business, the carrot people approached me and said, look, you know about snack foods and sandwiches. Could you help us sell carrots as a snack food, not just a vegetable, into the supermarkets, particularly for children's lunch bags? That was my entry into that. I restructured the farmers cooperative, and the farmers turned to me and said, well, you seem to be the only one that knows what's happening here. Why don't you become CEO? So as often as the case, doors open, doors close, and you need to make the most of it.
My father was a potato farmer. So he grew potatoes, and he also grew citrus. And it's interesting what people sell throughout their life. We, as we were saying before, were in pawn for 17 years. We're in pawnbroking. We bought and sold secondhand goods. And it's amazing that, for me, all business success comes back around to your ability to sell something, whether it be a service, whether it be some knowledge, whether it be some primary goods. But you've got to get really good at selling whatever it is that you've got.
Absolutely. Well, I do a lot of work with architects now, and that's a particular issue with architects, because they do a long course, they design some buildings, and they perhaps even win some awards, and then they wait for the phone to ring because they think that's enough. And really, I spend a lot of my time explaining to architects that you've got to demonstrate your value, you've got to get in the marketplace, you've got to build your network, and you've got to differentiate yourself from the competition.
It's interesting, the new reality of selling that we talk to our clients about is that there's more sellers than buyers in the marketplace today. I was doing some researches on coaches and consultants the other day, and the list that I brought up just around Australia, there was about 3,500 coaches in a similar field. And then you look out into the marketplace for the customers. And there's more sellers than buyers. And to be able to rise to the top is, one, you have to have a very strong personal brand. And we know in our life, and we're talking offline before, about the backstory you've got to be able to sell your story really, really well to people. And in Australia today, the relationship model of selling is so important. That's that ability to sell yourself first of all, and that's one sale. But then you've got to be able to sell your business as well, and the business has to have a saleable story.
A story. Well, I say to my clients, selling's a little bit like being a stand-up comedian. It's got to look natural and roll off the tongue. You've got to get the script right and make it sound natural. Tell your story in a way that's appealing, because when you come right down to it, people buy from people, and you may have the best business in the world, but if you don't build some rapport and you don't engage with people, they're not going to buy from you. They'll find someone else that's more attractive, easier to deal with, and more fun to be with, really.
Well, I must have beaten all the other guys, because that sounds like me. I was more attractive. I was more fun to be with. But she'll tell you my jokes are terrible.
Well, I'm just waiting for you. You told me earlier on that your family was in the mushroom business, and you must use the joke about being a fun guy to be with.
Yeah.
They just lock me in the dark and feed me bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
We talk a lot about emotional intelligence and connecting with people, and you've also mentioned building rapport here. When people are coming through the ranks after they've gone and studied and learned to become an architecture, what are some of the challenges that they have with building rapport with people? What do you see out there in the marketplace?
Well, I think this is been a realization for me over the last few years that as a business coach, I've taught business skills, competency and leadership and management and all of those things. But what I've realized is that the mindset shift that needs to take place is equally, if not more important. So I can teach architects all the skills, the vision, the finance side, even sales and marketing to some extent. But if they constantly sell as what I would call a technician, then they're never going to realize their full potential. So at one end, I draw a diagram, and at one end, over time, typically, if you're going to be a senior person, your need for technical skills drops as your need for leadership skills grows. And over time, you need to gather the skills of the leader. And I did think for a long time that was enough, but I found that many leaders still struggled. They had done the courses and they had effectively had the skills of the leader, but something was missing. And I think that was the mindset shift, that realizing that how you behave as a technician is very different to how you behave as a leader. And the clue is around questions. So a technician, whether you be a lawyer or an accountant or an architect, you get paid for solutions. And you ask me a question, I will give you the answer. You give me a problem, I will give you the solution. Whereas the leader, their strength is really based on good quality questions, coaching people, finding alternatives, gaining consensus by engaging with people. And I think there's a number of different elements to this technician to leader transition. Things like control. The technician is very used to being in control and understanding. They've done the training, they know, they've seen the problems before. So whereas the leader needs to be vulnerable and needs to get comfortable with vulnerability as a concept. Grey is the world of the leader, where black and white tends to be the technician. It's either right or wrong if you're an accountant. It's either fits or doesn't fit if you're an architect. But if you're a leader or a CEO, a lot of your time you are living in the grey and wondering, gee, I wonder, it could be this or it could be that. Nothing's completely clear cut.
Does vulnerability look like me crying out my eyes, like, and snot coming out of my nose? Because I think a lot of people, because that's what used to come into my mind about vulnerability, I had to cry my eyes out, I had to tell you all my weaknesses. Is that what is vulnerability in the field of architecture? What is it?
Well, I coached two people in it was actually a finance leasing company, and out of the blue, I asked one of the the managers, I said, is vulnerability in your business a positive or a negative? And without thinking, it came straight out, oh, it's a negative. I don't want to be laughed at by my boss. I don't want to be seen to be incompetent. So I then started asking that same question in a number of businesses, and predominantly I got the answer, vulnerability is a negative, because people see it as crying on the shoulder and weakness. And whereas vulnerability for me is tied very closely to authenticity. It allows people to ask for help. So really good CEOs and leaders will be quite comfortable to say two things. Can you help me? Because I'm a bit stuck, or I'm struggling with this problem. And I don't know. Okay? Be quite comfortable, rather than bullshit. They're quite happy to say, well, that's something I haven't come across today or before. Let me go and find out, and I'll come back to you on that. I really don't know the answer to that question. So another sort of fundamental difference, technician to leaders, and again, I'm evolving this thinking, and this is something fairly recent, but I realized that technicians actually engage with problems and their currency solutions. So they've had a good week if they get 10 problems and they come up with 10 different solutions. Next week's just another set of problems. Whereas the leader actually engages with people. That's their role. They need to engage with people, build relationships, and their currency, a bit like sales, is energy. You need to build positive energy in the relationships that you have. And I think that's a big distinction between the technician and the leader.
So if I'm a leader and I can't demonstrate vulnerability, what can I expect from my team?
Absolutely. It becomes a team of technicians who, so another analogy I use as well is the toolbox. And the really good people travel with a half full toolbox, because they know that, yeah, they've got some tools, but there are lots of tools they can still find. So the two things you need to do are test that your existing tools are still sharp, and keep on the lookout for new tools. And if your toolbox is getting a little bit full, get a bigger toolbox, because there's plenty of things still to learn and develop. So I do look out for full toolbox people who try to convince me that they've got all the answers. And architects can be a little bit full toolbox on occasions.
Edward de Bono, Maltese-born, I shouldn't say preach, what do they call when professor at Cambridge? He talks about the development. He wrote a book called You're Right, I'm Wrong. And what he said was, in the Western model of debating, you have to prove somebody wrong consistently. And he said that people who are very analytical, very left brain, are very good at building a case and proving you're right, I'm wrong. But he said the downside of that is that they can't explore. So when it comes to the exploration of a problem, talking about vulnerability, putting your hand up in the air saying, hey, I need some help over here, they're not good at that. Because if they do that, it proves them wrong and it exposes a weakness.
Yep.
So with building this toolbox out, 5-10 years down the track, how important is this vulnerability going to be, this new level of emotional intelligence coming into these people with this very analytical, overactive left brain? How important?
I think it's huge. I think we're living through an absolute revolution in the workplace, because I think young people, I've got grey hair. My father fought in the Second World War. It's the command and control industrial model was still alive and well for most of my business career. But I see it now that young people, particularly the sort of 25 to 35 group, they just won't put up with it. They won't work the long hours. They won't do things just because they're told to do things. They'll question, and almost think that they're given that sort of freedom and open discussion at school in a way that I was never given. I was taught things, but questioning wasn't really top of the list. There was an expert at the front of the room, and I sat and listened. And I think those days have gone. We've got to be very open. We've got to be intuitive around kind of how people are feeling and where they're at. And I think it comes back to the energy piece again. I think 20 years ago, if you'd spoken about energy in a business, or even to some extent culture, some of the senior guys would have laughed you out of the boardroom. We didn't do that touchy-feely stuff here. But I think businesses now realise that good culture is a fundamental piece of the story.
We've delivered about 1,350 case studies in emotional intelligence. And through my studies, what I've learned is that some of the CEOs have had the lowest levels of emotional intelligence. And it creates huge amounts of disengagement through the organisation. And we were working with one organisation, and the tip of the spear, the CEO, his level of emotional intelligence was 20 points below the other people on the board. And this created huge amounts of disengagement. First of all, the board, they couldn't come to a decision. They couldn't read one another's emotions effectively. Then they couldn't communicate. And then as that traveled down through the organisation of over 100 people there, they calculated 2 hours of disengagement per person in the organisation per day. So because of the low level of emotional intelligence, nobody was communicating up or down. 1.3, 1.4 million pounds worth of disengagement per year. That was just disengagement. That didn't count for the amount of lost sales or lost opportunities.
Or staff turnover, all of that stuff.
Staff turnover. And we're seeing now with the Fortune 500 companies around the world, 70 to 75% of the world's Fortune 500 companies are now budgeting for trainings in emotional intelligence to be able to teach these softer skills to the CEOs, because they're seeing that they need it more than anybody else.
Well, I think I have a real interest in the role of the CEO, because I meet many people who, the phrase that I sometimes hear, and if I offer it to people, that they're quite happy to agree, is that they feel like a well-meaning amateur. I was a really senior manager and I was doing really well. And then one day I was appointed CEO. I was given an office and a business card, and nobody really told me what being CEO actually meant. And it's a huge transformation in a business career the day you become CEO. You have never done that job before, and it's significantly different to that of a senior manager in a whole range of different ways. And I think the soft skills that you're speaking about, engaging with people, building teams, keeping the board on side, providing vision and energy and direction to the business, these are sometimes skills that have never been needed up to that point.
We talk about leadership as the ability to get followers. And if I want to follow somebody, I want to make sure that they understand how I think and how I feel, that they can not sympathize with me, but empathize with me. And so that when I share with them a challenge in the organization or with the customer, that they actually get it and they can tune in emotionally. And, it's that feeling of being heard. So, we're talking about here about good questions differentiate technicians and leaders, but what about their ability to listen, not just to the words, but to the feelings? How important is that?
Yeah, well, I do a simple exercise with some of my clients about the three components of a conversation. So you can either make a statement.
We tested with my wife.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll see if I pass and get dinner or not, or if I eat alone tonight.
You can make a statement, you can ask a question, or you can be quiet. And people often say to me, "Oh, so when you say quiet, why do you not put listening in there?" Well, because when you're quiet in a conversation, it doesn't mean that you're listening. It just means you're not speaking. And I think learning the skills of listening is absolutely crucial. And I used to think that listening was the key skill, but I now believe that it's the questioning skills that typically come before listening that is actually more important. If you ask the good quality question, then you listen to the answer and probably ask a good supplementary question. Then that's what listening's about. Too often, people will say, where did you go on holiday? And you say Fiji, and what you get back is a long story about them being in Fiji and the hotel they stayed in and whatever. Whereas if you're building a conversation, you would say, where did you go on holiday? Fiji, and what was the best bit of that trip? Or what did you enjoy most? And you build a conversation around good quality questions, not statements. So my encouragement to all my clients is make less statements, ask more questions, and learn to listen better than you listen at the moment.
I think people think just because they can hear, they're listening. But totally different. We spend a lot of time hypnotizing our clients over the years with different tools and techniques. And it's quite interesting is when you're taking them through a good series of directed questionings, what you actually hear. You hear the words come out of the mouth, but your eyes are open and you're watching the shifts in physiology. You're also tuning into that tone of voice and the speed of the words and the changes in the pitch. Mate, how you doing today? Great. Whoa, what's happening with the tone? Versus great. It's so important, those subtle things. And, what we have different here in Taiwan is, in the English language, we have 3 different tones. We have a question tonality, and this is where Aussies and British are terrible. Everything ends with a question tonality. You're right, mate. Whenever my British mates ask me how I'm going, I always think there must be something wrong with me. You're right, mate. And then we have the statement where it's just like, you're right, mate. And the command like, you're right, mate. But in Taiwan, they don't have these 3 tones. So one of the experiences I had a couple of years ago, I was invited out on a political campaign here in Taiwan. And the politician said, what I need you to say is, please vote for number 4, Jimmy. And he told me how to say it in Taiwanese. But I kept getting the tone wrong. So I was saying, bai tuo, si hao, wong bing. But because I got the tone wrong, the translation was like, vote for number 4, die, Jimmy. So they thought I was saying die, but I was supposed to be saying vote for number 4.
I see.
The tone.
It's amazing. It's, I tell my clients again, 90% of the message is nonverbal. So don't spend so much time on the words, but make sure that you look the part and that your tone's right. That's why I think one of the worst things that's happened to communication is email. And again, that's something I tell my clients is stop using email for, particularly we spoke earlier on about sales, You say to a sales guy, have you followed up with that client? Yes, I sent them an email yesterday. Well, you might as well not bother. It's you lose all of that 90% of the message and just a huge missed opportunity, and the email's probably gone in the bucket anyway. So
I think that's a really good point out there. When you're talking about we doing the human contact, in doing the business relationship building, like at the moment, a lot of things like automatic system, I send you the email. Why I bother to read the email? If you really care about me, that's what we do in our business as well. On a weekly basis, we always call our clients inside, check in, follow up, how you doing? And I think that's very crucial when you bring out that points.
Absolutely. For me, emails for 2 reasons. But the short one, I'm going to be late. I'll be there at 3 o'clock. Or anything that would otherwise need to be written down, a list or a set of dates or something like that. No emotion. No, I was disappointed to hear, I'm really happy about this, or because emails don't communicate any kind of emotion. In fact, they probably communicate an emotion that you didn't intend.
It was in 1999, 2000. We had a family real estate business in the western suburbs of Penrith. And back then we were talking about high tech and high touch, and kind of email was just creeping in. And my uncle, who was running the show, he said, in this game, it's high touch. Don't text message them. Don't call them. Go around to the house and speak to them face to face. If you want to get a price adjustment, go and do it face to face, because you're dealing with the client's biggest asset, their family home. And he would go around and he could see them for drink a beer for 10 minutes and talk about price for 5 minutes and get the deal done. Where people were trying to do it on the telephone, but it didn't work. They were trying to negotiate people's biggest life saving on the telephone. And it didn't work. And we still say today, in a high-tech world, you've got to be high touch. And we see that when we do this for our clients, first of all, they're quite shocked. They're like, why are you calling me? Just calling up to say, g'day, how's your week been? Is there anything we can do to help? And at the start, because they hear Ninny's accent, they think it's a call center from Taiwan. And then they see my telephone number. And they're thinking, is this Daniel? And some of our customers sing to me. They might sing, Danny boy, oh, Danny boy. And then they'll realize they're singing to my wife and they text me, really sorry, sang to your wife again today. But then they start to adjust to it and they love it and they look forward to it. And they've got that human connection. There's somebody else out there caring for them.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The numbers I quote are, in terms of, in a sales situation, the relative value is 80% face-to-face, 15% telephone, 5% email. And even the 5%, I think, is generous.
Yeah.
If I was walking down the street and I walked into an architectural firm and I was spotting out a technician, how would I spot this technician? What would they be doing?
They certainly typically would be working on something inanimate. They wouldn't be speaking to people. They wouldn't be engaging with people. And when they did engage with people, it would typically be a problem-solving conversation. You know, come to me with your problems and I'll resolve the problem. The people often mistake questions as being a route to find out something yourself. But a question that you ask that you already know the answer to can still be a really valuable question, because it encourages thought on the other person's behalf. And God forbid, you might not have the right answer and somebody might have a better answer. So I think if I was in an architect's office of the worst type, it would be heads down, getting on with the work, very little conversation, very little energy about the business. Whereas when I go to my clients, you can feel the energy as soon as you walk in. It's a vibrant workplace, people are chatting, and the work still gets done.
Do buyers want an architect, or do they want somebody who's going to bring their dream to life? What do they want?
That's a great question. I think different clients want different things. That's the key. When I speak to architects, they tend to lump these clients into one. They're almost a necessary evil. You know, we have clients, but we're really all about buildings. You just have to look at an architect's website, and I can guarantee you that probably 19 out of 20 will feature buildings, and more buildings. No smiley faces, no people. And if there is a person, it's typically something that's been computer generated and it's away in the distance. So I say to my clients, get the smiling faces on page one. That's what your clients want to feel good. And you need to find out what it is that you can do for them that's going to make them feel good. Don't assume that you know that, and don't assume that the building's going to do the whole job.
And what do you predict for the future? These architects who are good leaders and they're building these emotional relationships, they're listening between the lines, they're listening and asking great questions. What does the future look like for these architects in business?
I think great future on all fronts. We're going to be building things for a long time to come, but at the moment, a very small proportion of buildings are actually architect designed. They're designed by draftsmen and builders and just well-meaning amateurs. And architects need to re-establish their place in the market. They need to understand their value and be able to articulate that value. There are lots of successful architects out there, but there are also lots of starving architects. And the difference between the two is leadership, sales, good business skills, soft skills, managing people, building teams, and understanding that It's good business that leads to good architecture, not good architecture that leads to good business.
And for people who have that shortfall in their business and they want to learn more about what you're doing, how can they follow you? What's the best place that they can connect with you online or offline?
Yeah, archibiz.com.au, archibiz.com.au is our main website. And we have a mailing list. We call it the Mentors Memo that we put out every week. And we're sharing the learnings. We're learning a lot about architecture, and we're building a community that's interested in what we're finding out. Our signature program is an 8-week introduction to business, and that really is it's a group-based program that allows people to, in a safe environment, learn the business fundamentals and the business basics, whilst sharing with other people in the same position. So that's working really well. And obviously, we'd love to see more people participating in that program.
Nini and I will share the link for your website in the feed below here on the video, and we encourage you to reach out to Ray and his team. Incredible experience, coached more than 1,000 business people, led a team of 150 and 25 years experience as a CEO. And as a coach and a mentor, you couldn't find a nicer fella. So make sure you head over to his website there. Now, Nini, there's one question here that I'm dying to ask.
Yep.
Should I ask it or should you? About the most terrifying day.
I'll ask.
Are you sure you want to ask it?
Okay, you go.
You ask it, go on.
So just wondering, over the past 25 years of being the CEO and 15 years of being the coach. So in your opinion, what's the most terrifying day of the business person's life look like?
I think the most terrifying day for me, and it's a bit like I owned a boat, and they say there's the 2 best times of a boat is the day you buy it and the day you sell it. And it's a little bit like that with a business. When we sold our water cooler business, I was extremely happy because there was a lot of cash involved. I was extremely scared because I didn't think the deal was going to happen at the last minute. And that was also mixed with a bit of sadness that what's next and field of all possibilities. But that I think would be, for most people, the scariest time in business. It's businesses fail and all sorts of things, but even the sale of a business can be particularly scary. We used to say, business is my baby. You get very close to your business, and selling that on can be extremely scary. What am I going to do, and who am I going to be in the future?
Yeah.
Do people deal with this fear of the unknown in advance, or is it something that just pounces upon them at the last minute? Do they?
I think the connection there is I spend a lot of time speaking to people about vision, and I think sale of a business is a classic situation where you need an energizing vision, part of which is the sale of your business. To sell the business and then say, I've got all this money, I'm going to figure it out next is a real mistake. It's a little bit like retirement. You need to plan, you need to have a vision, you need to know what it looks like when you get it right, and not leave that to chance.
Yeah.
What's your scariest day in business?
My scariest day? I think it would be the moment when we want to change the model of the business, a little bit unsure if this will work or not, because if we make this mistake, we might lose this business. As you said, that kind of unsure uncertainty of what if I made the wrong decision? What if it's going to take me another few years to build what we already have? Yeah, I think that's the day, which is a few years back,
It can be very scary changing that business model. We were changing our business model, and we reached out to our coach, and because we're not shy, we will put our hand up and ask for help because we can't know everything about everything. And we put up our hand and we said, look, we want to make some changes here. We want to do business differently. We believe we should be working online. What advice do you have? And he gave some great advice. And he said, Daniel, you're going to have to change your business model 4 to 5 times before you find out what works for you. And he said, this is about the average. He said, but the first time you make a change, all of your sales will stop. And we made the change, and all of a sudden the sales stopped. But we were prepared for it. So it still shocked you because all of a sudden the money dries up, but we were prepared for it. And then just like he said, we made those 4 or 5 changes. We didn't know which one would be the one, but we did it and it worked and it took off and exploded again. And we're happy.
Fabulous.
Great
story.
It was quite terrifying, but we wanted to reach out to a coach and, asking another coach like yourself, why don't people reach out and ask for help?
Oh, I think it's now we've gone full circle back to vulnerability again. Asking for help doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. And people think they've arrived, they've made CEO, they've started a business, and yeah, it jars a little bit with some people. They get a misconnection in their mind that they've arrived and they're not on the journey. And I think using coaches and mentors, you just have to look around and see. I think at one time Tiger Woods had 10 coaches and mentors, whether it was nutrition and fitness and things. And his argument was, I just want to be 10% better than my next competitor. And I'm happy to work with anybody who can give me some of that 10%.
Yep.
Ray Conrad Levinson, in his best-selling book, Guerrilla Marketing, great opening line, all world champions have a coach. And when you look around, they do. And it makes sense why you'd get a coach. If you want to be the best in your field, why not?
Get a coach, absolutely. And that I would love to chat to you about coaching and mentoring generally, because I think that's a topic that's really confusing in the marketplace. And I think if people understood the differentiation between training, coaching, and mentoring, they would be able to purchase. People can only buy what they really understand, and I don't think coaching and mentoring is clearly understood. People use the words, but when you ask them to expand a little bit what they understand by that, it's usually pretty woolly.
I hired a coach who was a trainer, and I got a mentor. So we will have to do another episode and really explain the difference, because they are 3 different roles and they are required at 3 different times of the business, and definitely different, especially if you're a CEO looking for a coach or a CEO looking for a mentor, totally different. Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to share below in the field here Ray's website address, which is www.archiebiz.com.au, and make sure you reach out and have a good conversation. So Ray, thank you for sharing your vulnerabilities with us. I've learned a lot from you, and I'm sure there's so much more that people who are in the field of architecture can learn from you. And be sure to check out Ray, get onto it today, reach out. He's a top fella. So we appreciate you being here, and make sure you tune in for the next episode where we talk about the difference between coaching, mentoring, and training. So Ray, thanks for your time.
Look forward to it.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. All the best.
Pleasure.
Thank you.